Hey, welcome to Pete's To-Do List. On today's episode, we are going to change out an electrical outlet. And the reason why I'm doing this, we're painting the wall and kind of redoing the whole room. And I hate these old outlets. I don't know about you, but usually they're dirty as all get out. I just don't like the style of them. What I like is these new Decora outlets and the Decora plates. They're square. They look really nice, and they're nice and new and clean, and it just makes the whole room look so much better when there's new plugs, new switches, and everything else as well. Okay, so this is not a difficult job, but number one, just a quick shout out. I'm not an electrician, so anything I say needs to be taken with a grain of salt. This is what I've been doing. It's worked for me. If you're ever dealing with electricity and you don't feel safe, don't do it. Call an electrician. But this is what I do. So the first thing that I do is I will test the outlet. Hey, is it working? And I use 3 different kind of testers. So one, this is a plug tester, and it shows you if it's wired right. This is a little positive negative tester, and then also my Fluke volt alert tester. So number one, hey, let's see if this thing is working. And then you can tell that it's working because both of these lights are on and it shows that it's wired properly. So the tools that I usually use when I'm changing an outlet would be a little portable vacuum cleaner, because you always make a mess. Number 2 is a good pair of wire strippers, a pair of long nose pliers, a pair of side cutters, a flat-headed screwdriver. Oh, sorry, actually this is the wrong bit in here, because what I normally do is I have a Phillips bit in here, because most of the screws that hold the outlet into the wall are Phillips. So I have a Phillips bit. Then I have a straight flat bit for taking out the flathead screws. I have a level so that when I put the receptacle in, I can level it, make sure it's level. We talked about the switch and the plate, the receptacle and the plate, and then a little bit of vinyl tape, and also a cordless drill. Sometimes these screws that hold these receptacles in the wall are pretty long. And there's nothing wrong with turning these by hand. It makes you stronger and it's good for you. But after if you're doing 10 in a row, this can save you some time. So the first thing we're going to do, once again, never work on anything live. So I'm going to go out to the breaker and turn off the breaker, and when I come back, these should be dark. And then I'm going to test it again. So I'm going to go to the breaker. Stand by. Okay, so I've turned off the breaker. I can tell that this is not powered, and check both of these plugs because one might be on a different circuit than the other, but for what I can see right now, there's no power in both of those. So that's a good thing. I can also use my little handy dandy 2-conductor tester, put these little guys in here, and there's no light that comes on here. And also here. I'm so far looking good. I can also use my volt alert, press it on, stick it in. Ugh. Nothing. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that there's no voltage here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this screw. And I normally have a little garbage with me, which I forgot to get. So, okay, pop the plate off. Next thing I'm going to do, once again, I'm going to test this right against the terminals on the side of the plug. I got nothing. Okay, turn that off. I can also use my little voltage tester again. Nothing. Okay, I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty positive that this is safe to work on. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to undo these screws that hold the switch in, the plug in. Now when you're going to take off this, easier to hear me when the drill's not going. When you take off this plug, be careful sometimes because you can rip a piece of paint, on the top and the bottom. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take, my knife, or you can even use a screwdriver, just to score the paint on the top and then also the paint on the bottom. And then usually it should pop right out. Okay. So what we got here is this is dead. This side of the receptacle is for the white or the neutral. And this other side is for the hot. And it looks like this one, we have an extra couple things going on here. So we got 2 blacks, 2 hots, and a red. Red usually means this is a 3-wire cable and it's connected to something else. So one of the most important things is whenever you put in the new receptacle, it'll look almost exactly like the old one, right? So there's your hot side, and it says right on it here, so a little hard to see, but we just had an Amazon delivery, and the dude that's driving the truck is cranking the tune, so we had to pause for a musical interlude. Anyways, back to it. So what we got here is we got 2 cables coming in the back of this box. One is a 3-wire cable, which means there's a red, a black, and a white. And the other cable coming in is a black and a white. What typically happens in these in-wall receptacles is that cables will loop through and keep going and feed other receptacles. And what this usually means to me is that this is a switched outlet. And the reason why I know that is because on the sides of these plugs, there's these little brass loops. So if you look on the neutral side, right here, there's a brass connector that connects both of these screws together. But on this side, that little connector is broken off. And that's a way to separate these receptacles. So just by looking at this, I know that one of our switches on the wall over there controls this part of the receptacle, which means that you can plug in a lamp, and when you come in the front door, you can turn on the switch, which powers this part of the receptacle, which turns on the light. So the thing that you just got to do, and sometimes this is the best thing to do, is get your phone and take a picture of this so you know exactly how this was wired. Now that's one way to do it. You take a picture of it, you can cut all this off and throw this receptacle. Or another way to do it is just do it one at a time. Like for example, we can start with this. So it's the same configuration of screws, right? So the first thing that we can do is we can take off the ground, and we can transfer the ground over to the new receptacle. One of the things that I typically do, and hopefully you can see this, but I'm going to take this screw right out of the receptacle because I want to keep this loop that's already on the ground wire, because I'm going to reuse that again. And it's just real easy, because what you can do is you can just slip it over that ground terminal and it's ready to go. I don't have to retwist that. And now one of the things you always got to keep in mind is whenever your wire goes around this screw, it has to go clockwise, because you're tightening the screw in a clockwise rotation. So I'm going to tighten this down. And one of the things also to remember, whenever you're screwing on wires to terminals, you want to screw them down as tight as you can, because over time and vibration, and there's a chance they can come loose. So you want to tighten that down as hard as you can. Okay, so that's the first thing that we did. The next thing we can do is we can take out this neutral and put the neutral on here. And I'm going to keep this jumper on this neutral so that both of these receptacles have the white neutral connection to it. Now, one way to do these receptacles also is if you skin your wires, there's little holes in the back that you can just press them right in. It's a quick, easy way to do it. I'm a little bit more old-fashioned, and I like to twist them around the terminals and screw them in nice and tight, because that's the way I'm used to and that's the way I do it. So the next step that I would do is I would cut off this neutral, and then I'm going to untangle it a little bit so it's a little bit easier for me to feed it into the new receptacle. And then what I'm going to do is just straighten it out a little bit. Then I'm going to get my wire strippers, and I'm going to take off, and this is a sort of, you know, and it's an experience sort of thing. I know that right about here, for me, is the right amount of insulation to take off this wire. And then what I do next is I'll grab my long nose pliers, and I typically grab this right about in the middle here. And then what I'll do is bend it around and loop it, just like that. And then it doesn't matter which which screw you use, because they're jumpered. It doesn't matter. So whichever one suits your fancy there. Once you get it around the terminal, what I normally do then is just give it a little squeeze so it's tight around the screw. Get my Phillips screwdriver again, and then I'm going to tighten that down and snug it in as I'm going to tighten that really tough. I'm going to screw that in as much as I can. And then I'm going to tighten up this other screw. I'm not going to be using it, so I'm just going to tighten it down. Okay, and then we can go to the next side. Okay, so what this is doing is the red cable is supplying this one side. So I'm going to duplicate that over here, and these two blacks I'm going to put on that other side. But one of the things that I need to do first is I'm going to take off this little jumper. And I don't know, it might be a little hard to see, but this is the little jumper that bridges these two screws together. And then if you take your long nose pliers and you just bend this back and forth a couple, 5, 10, or 20 times. $30 times, 40 times, there it is. It's just a small, tiny little piece of brass connector that connects both of those terminals together. And I know it might be hard to see that. Anyways, you need to take that little piece off. And then what you'll see is that there's a separation now between these two screws. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, let's snip off the red. And then I can feed this around so that it's easier to put in. And then once again, I kind of know by feel, it's about probably a half an inch that I strip off. Back to it, we close the window and close the door so we can't hear whoever's outside. So once again, long nose pliers, I always turn them upside down so that when I grab the wire and bend it, it's right side up. And usually what you want to or what you want to try and do is the top of your end of your conductor is kind of at the same elevation as your stripped off insulation. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my red around this terminal here, snug it in. And I always like to give it another little squeeze so it's tight. Okay, grab my Phillips screwdriver, tighten this down. Now, even though I don't like using these back holes to put conductors in, what they've done here is they've screwed one around the terminal and one went in the hole of the back. So I'll just duplicate that. I don't normally do that, but in this situation I will. So here's where I can just back this screw out 100%. And it does get a little tough at the end of it because they purposefully do that so you don't unscrew these all the way. But that gives me my nice already stripped cable. So I'm going to reuse that again. Yeah. I just took the black one off that screw. I undid the screw just because it's already bent. And I'm going to put it around this open terminal here. Once again, tighten it down, squeeze it in, make sure it's good. I'm going to screw it in as tight as I can. Sometimes you actually have to pull these and give them a little tension so that they stay in place while you screw them down. And then you want to give it a nice good squeeze, nice good turn. You know what, I'm not happy with that. It's kind of sticking out underneath the screw. That doesn't pass my quality test, so I'm going to take this out here and do this again. And I was kind of looking at this going, well, I could reuse it, but there's not enough insulation off that for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend this straight. Straighten it out with my pliers. I'm going to take just another 1/8 of an inch off this, just because I like to have a little bit more wraparound on the screw. And then I'm going to turn my pliers upside down again, and then I kind of hold it like that, a little bit sticking out, maybe a 1/4 inch away from the tip. That gives it a good bend radius. And you can see that's a good little hook. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to get it in. It needs to be wide enough to go around the screw terminal. But you kind of wiggle with it and then you can hook it. So right now it's hooked around and it's good. I'm going to just squeeze it in there. See if I can give it a little pinch. And then I'm going to tighten it up with my Phillips screwdriver. And then tighten it down tight. And then the last thing to do is this one last black hot connector. I'm going to cut it off. See you. Bye-bye, old plug. I won't miss you. And then we're going to bring this other black around so it's easy to work with. And then what I'm going to do, so on some of these plugs, they actually give you a wire guide. And on this one, just trying to find out where it is. A little tough to see in the back there, but so on some of the plugs they give you a wire stripping guide of how much insulation you should take off the cable. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be approximately about right there. Usually they're not that long. And I have another receptacle here. So let's take a quick peek at this. There you go.
Yeah.
So you can, I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's a tiny little strip gauge here that says how long the cable should be if you want to stick it in one of these little holes. So let's see how good I did. So there's my mark. And holy cow, yeah, I'm 1/32 of a little bit too short, which is fine. So that's that little strip guide's on there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick it in the hole, and it should go right in. Ah, perfect. You see how the insulation went right to the back of the receptacle? That's what you're looking for. That's a good connection. That's in there solid. If you ever have to get those out of there, there is a little hole in the back of the receptacle that you can stick in a little tiny mini screwdriver, and it pops that connection loose and you can take it out if you have to. Sometimes, you know, when you're working on renovations, sometimes these cables are not very long. So it's a bit of a challenge. Luckily here we have, you know, a good 4, 5, 6 inches to work with. So I'm pretty happy with this right now. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to tuck these cable connectors back in the box. And then this is not, it's not a requirement, but this is something that I was taught back in my grade 12 electrical class, is that you tape up the side of the outlet. And I still do it today. I don't know if, it's certainly not required by code. And a lot of people don't do it. But the reason why I do it is because there's one or two reasons. So number one is, if someone ever takes this plate off, this receptacle, and they're painting, around here, and they're an idiot, and, they're trying to unscrew something and they slip, there's an immediate contact with your metal tool and the side of the plug, and then, by the way, you've just been shocked and possibly you're dead. So at least by putting this electrical tape on the side here, it gets a little bit of insulation and a little bit of, idiot proof if someone is mucking around with this receptacle or a switch without the plate on. So anyways, that's it. So the next step is, if you're comfortable with wiring and you think you did it the right way, you can put all this back together. And that's what I'm going to do, because I'm pretty sure this is going to work. Another way to do it is you can put in your tester right now, like that, and you can go to the breaker, make sure nobody else is around here sticking screws in there, make sure your kid isn't around here and messing around. But you can go to the breaker and you can turn it on to see if you got power. If you do, hey, great, turn the breaker off, come back here, undo your plug, put it all back, and then you're good. So my next step is I'm going to screw this in to the wall, and I think this is the biggest challenge of trying to change out plugs is to screw things back in. But once you get the screw started in that hole, you just got to also be very careful you don't strip these screws, because then you'll be in for a couple more minutes of frustrating times. So like that's starting to strip already, and I'm going to be very careful now. And if you press, like I got my elbow against my leg and I'm giving this some pretty good pressure here so that this doesn't strip, you can use the drill to save yourself some time. And that's it. That's all I want to use the drill for, just to get it in position so that, number one is it relatively straight? Is it relatively even? Because if it isn't, when you finally lock it down in place, it's going to be off and it just won't look perfect. So try and line it up nice and level, nice and even. And then the last couple turns, just use your screwdriver. And what I also like to do then is position the screw right in the middle of where your screw hole is for your faceplate. And if you do that, typically your hole will line up pretty good with your new receptacle and your new faceplate. So you don't want to go too tight on those, because that's going to bend the bracket. You just want it snug enough so you can't move it back and forth. And I'm going to do the same thing with this bottom one. I'm going to get it close, but then here's where I'm going to get my level. And I'm going to put that on the switch, on the receptacle. And now I'm going to make my little adjustments so it's perfect. That bubble is perfectly in the line of the level. I'm going to tighten this down a couple more turns. I'm going to take my cover off. A lot of these plates have these screws already preset for you, which helps out a lot, especially when you're doing a lot of them. Position that right on there. And what I always do is, you can always start turning this clockwise, but I always turn it a little bit counterclockwise just to find the start of the thread, and then I'll screw it in. And then get my bottom set up here. Just do a little kind of back turn. This one's giving me a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes it's a little hard to find where that's going to sit right. Oh, there it is. And then what I like to do is when I'm close, so there's two different types of faceplates. There's the hard plastic ones and then the unbreakable ones. So if you have the hard plastic ones, don't screw your screw in too far because you'll crack the plate. If it's one of the plasticky, bendy ones, then you can screw it in a little bit tighter. But what I always like to do, and what I was taught to do, is that these screws need to be perfectly vertical. And once they're perfectly vertical, you're done. And what you're looking for is that receptacle to be flush and even on your faceplate. And that's it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my tester and I'm going to go turn on the breaker and we'll be back to take a look. Okay, so good news. I turned on the breaker and it looks like we got power on the bottom outlet, and then I'm going to test the top outlet and we're good. So the neat thing about this tester is it actually shows you what happens when you have only one light showing here and this is dark, or vice versa, right? It tells you, hey, it could be an open, it could be an open neutral, it could be a cross. It helps you understand, did you wire it right? So I think we're good. One of the other things that I want to test is that because this is a switched outlet, I'm going to go over to the switch and see if this actually works or not. And I'm going to try that now. Aha! So I just turned the switch off and there's no power to that bottom outlet. I turn it back on, yay, there's power. Okay, so lessons learned. It's easy to change out these receptacles. It's easy to change out switches. And it looks so much better, like, oh my goodness, look at that. Compared to that old crap that was in there before, it's 100 times better. Just stupid little things like this, lipstick on the pig, makes everything look a lot nicer, better. So typically these are not, as complicated as this. If it's the end of a circuit, it's only going to be a black wire and a white wire and a ground. It's simple. If it's an outlet that's in series, it's going to have two cables coming in, two whites, two blacks, two grounds. It's not rocket science, The only thing that gives me a challenge every time I do it is Gfci outlets. I always have to take a picture. I always have to turn on the breaker a couple times to find out which is my feed or my supply and which is my return, because a Gfci, you have to wire it in the correct position to enable it to work and to enable the Gfci's downstream to work properly. Anyways.
And what is a Gfci?
Gfci is a ground fault circuit interrupter. So you'll see Gfci outlets anywhere near water, so by your bathtub or by your sink. And that means that if I plug something into that outlet that's a powered device, and oops, I drop it in the sink like a hairdryer, it'll immediately turn off that circuit faster than you can imagine to protect yourself so you won't kill yourself. So it's just an extra protection. Anyways, that's how you switch out an outlet. Hopefully you find this interesting. If you have any comments, let me know. Like, do you do it different? Do you do something that I don't do? Am I doing too much? Let me know. I'm happy to hear from you. And then if I earned your attention and you like what you saw, give me a like, give me a subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.